First of all, thank you so much for coming. This is so much better attended than my classes. I'm very happy you're all here. Tonight's talk, I want to give you a little bit of an idea as to where we are in terms of brain-computer interfaces. The first thing we have to talk about a little bit is the idea of states of mind. If I ask you, what does your mind consist of? You might have a difficult time answering me. At first, you kind of think, well, maybe it's some thoughts, some memories, some ideas, whatever. At any given moment, if I asked you to categorically list the contents of your mind, you might have a difficult time with it. Because first of all, we all know there's some things that you just don't know because they're subconscious, right? And other things that you might be aware of, but you're not quite sure of. Is it possible your mind is tricking you, and so on. And so to begin, let's very quickly talk about the idea of some of the things that we might want to talk about interfacing with the computer in terms of your mind, specifically your brain. If we just make this simplified model of a graph that would show something like a person and what they are thinking at any given moment, you can imagine, just for two possible examples, simple axes like perception on one axis, meaning what they see or hear or smell, and their ability to move an object on the other axis. For example, their ability to control their arms. And so, person in red might be something like they perceive everything great, all five senses work. But you'll notice they're very low on the motion scale, meaning maybe they're a quadriplegic, somebody whose limbs are paralyzed. This person is very high on the motion scale. Maybe they have full use of their limbs. However, they can't perceive certain things. For example, maybe they're blind, something like that. And so we could create scales for a few different axes. I only put two on here because obviously I can't think in like 5 dimensions. But here are 5 that are pretty common. If you said, tell me what's in your mind in terms of things that we can talk about and things that we could at least interface with in some meaningful way with technology, you might come up with a list something like this. At least I did. And I'm sure there are plenty of others, and super nerdy people sit around and argue all day long about what exactly is in the mind as constituted through the brain. Right? There's lots of disagreement to this day. Did you need something?
Just a quick question.
I suppose so, as long as it's relatively quick.
What does negative perception mean?
In this case, you'd have to set 0 to some number. Like you could say standard would be 0, and you could say, okay, if you're in the negative regime, you're somebody who has some kind of deficit. It depends upon how you want to calibrate the scale. And again, for our purposes, I'm just showing you this as an idea of what kind of things you might want to talk about controlling and how you might even quantify or plot these types of variables. And again, even quantifying them is going to be a challenge. You're going to go, well, who gets to decide and what scale are you going to use? And, cognitive scientists spend a lot of time sitting there talking about this. How can we possibly quantify this? What are you going to look at? Now, connections between these items would be another possibility. For example, a person might be creative using things that they're recalling out of their memory. They come up with 2 disparate objects and create a piece of art out of that. And so we would love to deal with all of these and plenty more in terms of what we deal with brain-computer interfaces. However, tonight I will focus on the top 3, mainly because that's what I know the most. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of areas where progress has been made on these other ones. One guy in our lab right now is working on peak states for memory recall at UC San Diego, where he can track brain data for a 1/10 of a second right before a stimulus is presented and can tell you if your brains are like this, you're in the optimal state to remember something. And so I told him, put it into a movie. So you have a movie, and when your brainwaves get to just the right spot, it'll present you with the chemical formula for benzene, and that's what you need to know. And then you go back to watching your movie. But that's still in development. These 3 are the ones with which I'm most familiar, so naturally these 3 are the ones we have to start with. This is what I can talk to you about intelligently. If we were to talk about accessing the mind, and more perspicuously for our purposes, the brain, the question becomes, what kind of tools would you like to use? Now, in a perfect world, obviously, there's a little problem right off the bat, that most of you are still alive, at least I hope. And so getting inside your brain is not going to be an easy task, because we can't just cut you open, for the most part, and say, ooh, what do we want to do with this? So it's hard to access these things when the person's still alive. In some cases, as we'll see in a moment, that actually does happen. But for the most part, the ones that I work with, at least, we don't do that kind of thing. And so, first of all, let's talk about what brain structure looks like. This is a picture of a standard neuron that you might see in someone's brain. Now, of course, it's not a photograph, it's a drawing. But the idea is these structures are electrochemical, meaning that these little bits at the end, these dendrites, get electrical signals from other dendrites. And these are all summed up in this middle area. And if the voltage achieves over a certain threshold, the neuron is going to fire, sending an electrochemical signal down this axon and out into a bunch of other dendrites. These other dendrites are then connected to still other neurons. And how your neurons are wired and how they fire determines, for the most part, everything about you. It determines how creative you will be able to be. You know, it's going to determine how mathematically minded you are. It's going to determine what kind of tastes you like. Think about all the things that you assume about the world are some kind of function of mind. In reality, we could probably break them down to a function in some way of your brain. The way we wire your neurons determines, from a scientific perspective, all these things about you that you classify as you, the person. And so it would be really nice to be able to access these kinds of things and tell what people are doing. However, there is a problem that we can't open up your head. So all we look at most of the time is what is coming out, and I'll show you one where we go inside. But we're looking at mostly this electrochemical activity. And what we want is a way to detect it. If you can detect the electrochemical activity, you're fine. We can figure out what to do with it. We can interpret it in a meaningful way. If we can't detect it, we can't. So, connect all of these together and you get this giant neural network that is your brain. To access these resources, there are three main techniques. I work with what's called an EEG. However, there are two others that we should address because they're really on the front edge in this kind of research. The first one is what's called ECOG, or electrocorticogram. I'll show you pictures of each in just a second. The second one's an MRI, which is magnetic resonance imaging. And then the third one's an EEG, the electroencephalogram. How many people have heard of at least one of these before? Two of them? Three of them. What are you, a neuroscientist? Wow, like half the room knows everything I'm going to talk about. Okay, that's going to be a short talk. An ECOG, the electrocorticogram, is a way of measuring brain data by actually putting electrodes directly into a person's brain. You're going, really? We take this device with this tiny plate. The plate has a set of sensors on it, which are affixed directly to the brain's surface. And then the electrical signals measured from the neurons firing inside the brain are routed into this wire, which will then be routed into whatever measuring device we're using to process data. This is how tiny they are. They're incredibly small, smaller like baby aspirin, something like that. When we put them on a brain, they look like this. This is an actual brain with an ECOG on top of it, with wires coming out. This is actually, the skull is cut away. Most of the time, one of our classic problems is how do we get a signal through all of this? You know, it's very hard to measure. So ECOG gives us by far the most accurate resolution. Individual probes in an electrocorticogram can measure down to about 100 neurons firing at a time. Meaning if you've got a little wire in there and you've got 100 neurons around it, it measures the average of all of those, all at once. We can't measure individual neurons yet. Our probes aren't small enough. But the idea is that the more accurate the probe, excuse me, the better data we get. And the better data we get, the more we can do with something. And I'll show you exactly where this ties in a few minutes. How many people have ever had an MRI, for example? Most of you know what I'm talking about, right? These big tubes they stick you in. What they're measuring, in effect, with an MRI is we shake a particle over here, and we measure how much it affects the particle over there and how much it shakes in response. In the meantime, you're in between the two particles. We do this, we move the whole thing around in a big circle to get a 360-degree view, and then from this information we can reconstruct an image. But what we're reconstructing, this is a picture of an actual MRI, reconstructed with visual aids. What we're reconstructing are what are called hemodynamic flows. I mean, we're actually looking at how blood is moving into your brain. The reason is because whenever you're doing something like thinking hard about something, your brain goes, hey, give me more blood, I need oxygen. Right? And so very quickly, this oxygen will rush in the blood and go to the right parts of your brain. That's what we're measuring with the MRI. This is a problem right after that because the effect is latent, meaning that like you will think something, work on something, and then very quickly we will say, hey, give me more blood. The MRI machine measures the blood, but the problem is that's too late for you to go control something with it. We need signals in real time. And so there's a very small delay. I think it's only a fraction of a second, but still enough to be relevant. Then if you're saying, I'm paraplegic and I want to control a wheelchair with my brain, When you say stop, it better stop now. Like, you can't stop in 2 seconds. It's too late. And so MRIs are useful for some purposes, but have limited applicability for this kind of problem. The last one we deal with, what I work in, is what's called an EEG, an electroencephalogram. An electroencephalogram, or EEG, is we take a cap, and each of these is a little electrode placed over someone's head. And where these electrodes are, we put in silica gel. So the cap is a little more conductive because we're trying to read an electrical voltage difference from all the way outside of the head. And so it's very hard. These are called wet caps by their design. And so the more electrodes we put on them, the better. And so we make caps for all different sizes, from adults to frightened children. And we actually do this. We actually have, this is, Gideon Diak works right down the hall from me, and he literally has babies come in and put on electrodes and do stuff. Once we set these up, we were able to take voltage measurements. There's a problem. Right off the bat, these things use the silica gel. The silica gel only lasts about an hour total. You're going, oh, after an hour you have to go through and put it back on again. And it gets all over your hair. If you take it off, it's all over your hair. It's gunked in, you have to go home and shampoo it. So it's very hard to get situations where somebody's out in the world doing something, and we want to measure their EEG data, or somebody's actually interacting in a classroom, for example, and we want to measure their EEG. Imagine trying to take everybody in this room and set them up with an EEG cap with lead electrodes. We'd sit here for 6 hours just setting you up for 1 hour of data. It's really, really hard. Just a little over 2 years ago, I was at a conference at UCSD, and they were talking about the idea that maybe someday we would have dry electrodes, meaning things that you could actually put on a person's head, and it would go straight through their hair, through their skull, through what's called their cerebrospinal fluid, through their skin, and we would get signals without having to bother with all that gel stuff. This is a picture of it from last year. In 1 year, we went from them talking about it to them actually having it. I took this picture at the Asilomar conference in Monterey last year. And so we have, right now, they're out there today. And so people are starting to use them more and more because finally we can get representations of data when people are just walking around in the world doing stuff. You go, I want to know what happens when a person's talking to their friends throughout the day, not just for the 1 hour they're sitting in my lap. Right? Here's another example with more electrodes of someone going for the Nerd of the Year award at work. I just can't, I'm going to walk to work with this. Yeah, that's going to happen. And so, but this is actually what's called a DSI setup. This is actually sold by a company called Wearable Sensing right over here in La Jolla. And they have these right now, they cost about $20,000 for one of these setups. But you can get them, researchers use them all the time. And so with this setup, you get all kinds of EEG data, much richer than we could, even a few years ago with a dry cell. And every single year they get better. This has opened up a whole new field of how can we control computers with our brains. Because before it was, you were limited to an hour. And now you can do it all you want. Just put on the headset and help yourself. This is what EEG data actually looks like then. On this picture on my left are the electrode sites that we just talked about. You can see from the side, this is like where each person's putting an electrode. Here's the view from the top of the head, this is the nose. So you can see each electrode is gathering voltage at that site. What is the voltage I'm feeling? And so this is then plotted, this is a graph of that data. And you can see each one of these channels is one of these electrode sites. And so all we are doing from here then is taking this data and plotting it out as a function of time. And so for example, this says ictal event, this is somebody having a seizure. This is real EEG data we got on them while they were having a seizure. And so all of this, if you think about it in computer science terms, becomes this giant matrix of numbers. You guys ever work with matrices in math? You still do that in high school? You were looking at the cute girl or boy that day, you actually saw it. The matrix of numbers is literally just channels down the rows and time in the columns, and that's it. It's a giant matrix of numbers. We sample on the setups I use at about 512 hertz, meaning about 500 times a second it goes grabs the data point. And so these will be standard about 64 channels. This is a 32. But standards we use now are about 64 channels, which gives you 64 by 500, about 30,000 numbers in a second. And they're just flowing into your computer. Figure out how to interpret the numbers, you get the whole game. That's everything.
Have you done that? Have they done that?
Me personally? No. No. This is still such an active area of research into, first of all, what are the limits of this? Because you're getting the numbers, but keep in mind this doesn't have every possible thing in someone's brain. For example, EEG only works down to a spatial resolution of about 1 cubic centimeter. That means if you're looking at it, it's a bunch of neurons like about this big, like a clump. And you're going, okay, that's helpful, it's good, but it doesn't give you everything. You'd like to work with structures that are much, much smaller. But if you could, it would be nice. In a perfect world, we get one of those little ECOGs and put it in everyone's brain, all over their brain, but we would all be dead if we tried. And so that doesn't work either. And so it's up to material scientists and engineers to try to get this data resolution to a better number, something we can actually play with where you get smaller and smaller values. And I'll show you why in a few minutes. This is kind of really helpful and why we have limits with it. So this is how EEG data actually is gathered. How people sit there and go, okay, I'm sitting in the lab, I got a cap on someone's head, now what do I want to do? Think about this, think about that, try to do this, remember that, whatever it is you want to do, and you look at this data and try to train a computer to come up with a representation of what they're thinking. And I'll show you in a few minutes of some, like for example, where you're thinking about moving your hand, and we can tell that right in the data, what you're going to do. Okay. So let's talk the big three that I mentioned we were going to have in terms of what we were going to actually try to do something with. Direct perceptions, meaning our senses and how they work. Motion, meaning how we move objects. And cognition, what we think about. And you'll see the cognition section is pretty small, mainly just because, frankly, it's still a very active area of research. Even defining cognition clearly is difficult. Even getting clear results is difficult. But these are very straightforward. I can tell you if you see something or if you don't. And I can tell you if you can move your arm or if you can't. And so those two are very much more developed in terms of the research. So let's try direct perception first. Some of the things that we might want to try with this, first of all, are replacing our current senses. Imagine a world where you could see in the ultraviolet regime, or gamma ray. You ever see Predator? Yeah, that classic movie from the 80s. Imagine if you could see like the Predator. Is that so out of bounds? Why not? There's no reason you can't. The waves are hitting you. All you need to do is have a device that translates to your brain. What about cross-wiring senses we've never had? Has anybody ever heard of a condition called synesthesia?
It's when one of your senses, like hearing, swaps, and you have a visual.
Exactly. A cross-wiring of the senses. So somebody will sit there and go, the number 7 tastes bitter. This person has a cross-wire, so their visual system is wired into their taste, into the gustatory system. By mistake, like we didn't do it to them. It was an error. And so they literally hear sights, and they will taste sights. So imagine if you could all experience that. If you feel like it, you just switch things around for it. It's no big deal at all. How about interacting with non-physical reality, like augmented reality or virtual reality are the last two. And I'll show you examples of where these are all happening right now. This is a cochlear implant. Has anybody ever seen one of these before? Okay. Yeah, cochlear implants are a little more advanced than hearing aids because they actually take sound and translate it. Can you see this? Yes, you can. They take sound and translate it up here into electrical impulses. These electrical impulses then flow right in the cochlea and serve as the basis for hearing, replacing what would normally be done in the ear.
Here we go, it's coming back on, and he's back on again. See how he turns?
Turn.
Hi, Jonathan.
Stop the sucking.
Hi.
Good.
Could
That's
you
real good.
hear that? Hi,
Okay.
sweetie. Could you hear that? Hi. Hi.
You got that, Dad, right?
Hi, Jonathan.
Look at that. That's so
Hi.
sweet.
We call that a late Christmas present.
And that baby's out there today. That baby has a cochlear implant, in effect a brain-computer interface, simplified version, not too advanced. This device just takes sounds, translates it into electricity, and pumps it into his auditory cortex in the right configuration so that he hears sound correctly. This was absolutely impossible 15 years ago. Not even in the realm of what we could do. Here's another example. How about if we did it with vision? Has anybody heard of a bionic eye before? No, a little newer on that one. This is a bionic eye where we actually take a plate and insert it into the retina. For example, people with macular degeneration where their eyes aren't working anymore. Excuse me. We insert the plate into the back of the retina. The plate has photosensitive cells that the light can fall on. Once the light falls on these cells, it is then translated into an electrical signal, which the video will catch up with me. More light. More light. They're very proud. Which is then translated into an electrical signal, which is then wired into the visual cortex of the person. And the visual cortex now allows them to see normally. I had just heard of this technology about 7 years ago, and at the time it was in the very first trials. They had like 16 photosensitive cells. Last I heard, they'd increased it by a couple of thousand cells. Like they've made the cells smaller and smaller, so you get better and better pictures. The smaller the cells, the more photosensitivity you can get. And so this of course powers the devices behind the ear, but implanted in their head. And so this thing literally is enabling people to see that would have been blind completely. How long do you think it is before we change that and pump it up by letting you see UV or infrared or microwaves or whatever you want? You know, anything that's in the electromagnetic spectrum, we could make it so you could see it and put it through your visual cortex in a way no one's ever done. Yeah, she's like, I don't think so. I'd love to see like the Predator. This sounds awesome. Predator. Get to the chopper, you know, Predator. Augmented reality. How many people have heard of this? Maybe one or two. Augmented reality, in distinction to virtual reality, is the idea that we can enhance reality by putting extra images on top of the real world. For example, these two people are holding cell phones, and those cell phones have applications which will let them then add into whatever the picture is that the camera's seeing. This person has decided to have their professor eaten by a T-Rex. I know some students that empathize, it's okay. And this person is just showing something flying in the background in the air. And so I've always thought this would be really cool to do something with, for example, for education and astronomy. There are some concepts that are hard for people to see, like visualizing black holes. You could just totally lay one over top of the center of the room. Students all point their iPad or their camera at the center of the room, and they see it as though I've put this object in the room, but there's nothing really there. Now, this is not at all out of the realm of possibility. Now, you very quickly might go, well, what's that got to do with the brain-computer interface? Just one slide ago, I showed you where people were now wiring into the visual cortex things that aren't natural, like it's a plate with a photosensitive set of cells. How long do you think before we put this in the plate? I'm surprised that somebody isn't doing it right now. I would be in shock if 2 years from now we don't see these kinds of things where people can overlay their own images into bionic eyes, and then people can see whatever they want to see. You can have programs for it. Kind of like Google Glass, but internalized into your eyes. This isn't at all out of the question. Next one, virtual reality. How many people have heard of the Oculus Rift? Okay, few, yeah. Oculus Rift was this company that Facebook bought for like $1 trillion or some crazy number. And it's a virtual reality headset. Has anybody actually tried one? No? Where did you do it?
E3.
Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I did it up in Irvine. They had a display in the place I was at. And it's pretty good. The whole big difference is that when you look, the scene tracks with you. If you look left, right, the scene tracks left, right. It doesn't look like you're looking at a static picture. So you can put it, like imagine a set of cameras up here in the front, and I'm standing somewhere on the other side of the country, and I move my head, and I see the classroom just like you're sitting here with me. Again, this directly isn't a brain-computer interface yet, but how long until we program it so it is? You know, not very long, I'm sure. Further, has anybody ever tried Second Life? No? One of you? Like one? Okay, so Second Life, try it out. You can try it out. Is it Linden Labs or is it secondlife.com? I can't even remember. Oh, okay. I think it's secondlife.com now. They used to be lindenlabs.com. Second Life is a complete virtual interactive world, kind of like World of Warcraft, except for they have their own economy, they have their own buildings, they have, you can buy land in there. I mean, everything, it runs like a macroscopic version of the world in digital form. And so they even have money called Linden Dollars. You can go buy Linden Dollars with real money and buy things in the game. And when you buy them, you own them permanently. And so people sit there and sell things in this game, and somebody's buying them, it's working. You know, you look on the Linden Labs website, they have a measurement of how many dollars are going through their system every minute while people are buying and selling. They have a whole economy. You know, hook this into a brain-computer interface, you'd never need to come into the real world again. Yeah. Some days when I see in the real world, that sounds better. Plus, I can fly in this one, so I'm kind of digging it. Motion. Let's try the next section. First one was direct perception, second one's motion. This is your brain. Right here is what's called the primary motor cortex. Taken from the side in the right hemisphere of your brain, this is what it looks like. This gives you the ability, we can tell down to the point that if we sit there and stimulate like this section where it says hand, your hand will twitch. All of this controls everything about what you are doing in terms of how you move parts of your body. Now, I actually proposed a project at UCSD about a year ago where I wanted to make a brain-computer interface with an EEG that would make it so the person could control everything about them and create an avatar in a video game. Like, so for example, it would have a whole body, and you go like this and go, and you would think, and the hand would flex. Or you do this, and the hand would point. Everything. The problem is EEG has inadequate spatial resolution to do this. An electrocorticogram, which was the one where we talked about them putting electrodes directly in the head, could do it. But an EEG doesn't have that ability. It doesn't have enough spatial resolution to pull it off. And so that's kind of out of the way for now, but you can still use it for things like walking with a brain-computer interface. I'll show you in just a second. The things we might want to control using an EEG, we might want to control ourselves, we might want to control external objects, like something else, and we might want to control something in a digital world, like a second life character, for example. This isn't just magic, it actually exists. How many people saw this classic movie, I, Robot? Okay. Do you remember Will Smith had a fake left arm? There you can see the robotic under his fake left arm as he fights off robots. It exists today.
Hi, I'm Nigel. I lost part of my arm in an accident at work a few years ago. Since then I've been fortunate enough to be given one of these to trial. This is the B-Bionic V3. It's a prosthetic hand and it works from sensors on the inside and outside of my arms and muscle control. If I activate this sensor, the hand opens. Activate this one, the hand closes. It's got 8 preset patterns which I can use throughout the day. I can move the thumb. To give me point grips, this I can use, I can type, and it has a wrist on it. And this is all controlled purely by 2 muscles, one on the outside and one on the inside of the arm. As you can see, it's a really nice piece of equipment, and I love it. Bye-bye.
And he loves it. Oh wait, there, go back one. There. Nigel is using a system which is a little different from a true brain-computer interface, although there are people who would argue with me about that definition. Nigel's system has a system like cut off at his elbow, where his arm is cut off. The nerve endings that normally would feed into his arm have sensors on the other side, in the robot side, which detect what he's trying to do and then move it, like move his hand or whatever. It has preset patterns because at this point, reading directly off those nerves is still too complex. But the problem is that you go eventually, he probably will be able to, but does that count as a brain-computer interface? Given that it's not directly reading any signals from his brain, it's reading them off the nerves, the motor neurons going down his arm. You kind of go, well, does that count? You know, I don't know. And nobody knows, because I was just at this conference where they were trying to come up with a definition of brain-computer interfaces for the society, and they're not sure whether or not to count people who are using external augmentation that rely on motor neurons instead of just reading a brain signal. It isn't a clear definition. You know, they'll figure it out, but for right now, it's still an open question. Anybody ever see this classic movie, Bruce Willis and Surrogates, a couple years ago? Not as popular of a movie. I was kind of, I don't know if they're going to see it. In this movie, he's a lot older than this, but it's set in the near future, and everybody controls robots with their brains. And so this is a robot, and that's a robot, and they're sitting inside the robot plant, where these are like models of the robots. You can see they're half completed. Nobody ever goes outside their houses anymore in the movie. Everybody has a surrogate, like a robotic person, that goes out and does everything for them and feeds the signals back into them. That way they can never be hurt, and they can look as good as they want every day, and they can be a different race or a different gender or whatever they want, because the surrogate can be anything, whatever they want it to be, right? And so this idea, you go, well, could I really control an external, being with my own mind? Sounds silly until you realize that they've already done it.
In this paper, 2 people with tetraplegia, that is 2 people who were unable to move their arms or their legs in any functionally useful way, were able to control a prosthetic or a robotic arm simply by thinking about the movement of their own paralyzed hand. And they did that using the investigational brain-gate neural interface system. So they thought about using their own arm and hand as though they were reaching out themselves with their own limb, and the robotic arm moved much the way their own arm would have moved. One of the long-standing questions, not only in neuroscience but in neurorehabilitation, is whether the cells in the motor cortex and other parts of the brain, whether they continue to function the same way years after that original injury.
It is possible for people to use their thoughts to control devices, either a computer or a robotic arm. And the way that happens is that we implant a tiny sensor, just about the size of a baby aspirin, just into the surface of the brain, and that sensor pick up the electrical impulses from a bunch of neurons. And each of those little neurons are like radio broadcast towers putting out impulses. And when they get to the outside, a computer translator converts the pattern of pulses into something that is a command.
One of our participants was able to do something that, when all of us saw it for the first time, gave us all pause. She reached out with the robotic arm. She thought about the use of her own hand. She picked up that thermos of coffee, brought it close to her, tilted it towards herself, and sipped the coffee from a straw. And that was the first time in nearly 15 years that she had picked up anything and been able to drink from it solely of her own volition.
There was a moment of true joy, true happiness. I mean, it was beyond the fact that it was an accomplishment, I think an important advance in the entire field of brain-computer interfaces, that it was really a moment where we helped somebody do something that they had wished to do for many years. This is the culmination of more than a decade of work, beginning with science at Brown University, that laid the foundation for all of the translational work that led from monkeys playing video games using their thoughts to humans being able to control a cursor in 2006 to ultimately to today's accomplishments.
This kind of research can only happen when institutions come together and bring together teams of scientists and engineers and physicians to work closely together to create the ultimate device, one that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, works perfectly every time, and works for a lifetime. That's where we're all headed, and we still have some distance to get there. But to know that it's possible makes all of us quite encouraged about the future.
And so that's one of the applications. That person's controlling a robotic arm. The original experiments were done with macaques and rhesus monkeys. And there's other videos, you can find them on YouTube and the TED Talks, where they do the exact same thing, except for they did it with monkeys first to make sure they could do it. And in those days, you'll see like the monkey will have his head like sitting still, and he can't reach out for anything. But they have the ECOG in his brain, and he'll think, and sure enough, the little robot arm will reach out, grab a banana, give it to him, he'll bite it, move it away, do it again, over and over. And so these are out there now. The only problem is the limitations. The ECOGs are much better because they go directly into the brain structure. And so they're much, much better for gathering much more accurate data. The problem is how you do the same thing with the EEG. Given that you don't get as much spatial resolution, what are you going to do? We talked about the idea of controlling a robotic arm or having an arm attached to you. But what about the idea of controlling something completely external from you that isn't even part of yourself? Pardon the intro on this, it's a little weird for like 5 seconds, but then it's okay.
This remote-controlled robot with a nose-mounted camera turns right and left, moves up and down, and even flies through a ring, all on commands from a controller who uses a special instrument. And what is this instrument? The controller's mind. Here at the University of Minnesota, Professor Ben He and his team have engineered a non-invasive system called a brain-computer interface that allows a person to control a robot using only their thoughts. Dr. He's team includes Alex Dowd and Carl Lafleur.
For example, if you imagine making a fist with your right hand, it turns the robot to the right.
And if you imagine making a fist with both hands, it moves the robot up.
Here's how it works. When the controller imagines a movement without actually moving, specific neurons in the brain's motor cortex produce electric currents. These currents are detected by electrodes in an EEG cap, which sends the signals to the computer. The computer translates the signal pattern into a command and beams it to the robot via Wi-Fi. In this case, turn right.
This brain-computer interface technology is all about
helping people with a disability or various neurodegenerative disease to help them regain mobility, independence, and enhance performance. We envision they'll use this technology to help control wheelchair, artificial limb, or other devices.
This has tremendous potential for people who can't move or speak. And the best part is,
it's completely non-invasive. Nobody has to have a chip implanted in their brain to pick up the neuronal activity.
We're very proud to have taken this step towards that goal.
And so that gives you a flavor. This is the ability to literally control an object that isn't even a part of your normal body. This one they kind of laughed at me for. I proposed another idea at UCSD last year. I wanted to give her, I know it sounds really crazy, I wanted to take children and give them prehensile tails. And you go, what? One of the problems with brain-computer interfaces is that when you're older, your brain isn't as plastic. So coming up with things like, well, how are you going to wire your brain to control something is harder. But when you're young, you're not used to anything yet. You're just learning to move your arms or your legs, so your brain is still wiring, hey, that's part of my brain, I can move that. If we started out with little children, like the little baby we saw earlier, and had them wear EEG caps as much as possible with a tail that was attached to them, like a harness. My students are now laughing. See, which isn't that unusual in and of itself. You could literally have a child who would grow up with the idea that controlling an external appendage, like a prehensile tail, was a normal part of their day. That would be as normal as you moving your left hand. Right? And imagine how much better they'd be on the computer since they could click the mouse with it. It would be awesome. You know, they said something about kids and not be able to experiment on them. I said it's all for science, pal. Let's try one more. This one is actually an object which is not in the real world. This lady, the subject is controlling, she's walking around inside of a virtual simulator. What we see, it's kind of loud. We see on the screen what she's seeing inside the headset. And so as she looks around, this is the virtual world, but kind of like Second Life. But the cool part of it is that she's not using any controllers. It's using a cap where it has electrodes around the side of her head that's detecting her intent. She's thinking walk forward, like she's imagining herself walking forward, and the player in the game walks forward, sure enough. And so this exists now. This is out there. People can literally control themselves inside virtual reality or video games using only the power of their brain. It doesn't have the details of things like, I want to put my hands out and do this. I can't do that because I can't tell sensitively enough using just the EEG. But I can read things like, I'm trying to walk forward. Imagine themselves walking, and the game picks it up and goes, oh, walk forward. So they can move forward, backward, left, right, anything they want, just by imagining it inside the video game. Yeah?
Can you fly?
I don't know. You could if you program something. The problem is you have to map a motor imagery onto it. So when we do it, like when we do it simple games, we'll say things like, imagine moving your right hand. And people will go, do you mean visualize my right hand, like I see it move? Or do you mean think about what it feels like to move? And the answer is the second one. Imagine what it feels like to do this. And so something's shown really clearly, like you can't do like move your finger, that's not enough. But you can imagine flex your right hand, like the robot, the hover thing did. Or flex your foot, that works. It's just big enough in the brain that we can read it with just an EEG. So as long as you map something onto it, if you have something like imagine flexing both hands, and that's lift. Absolutely. The reason that's completely within the boundaries of what you can do. Did you have another question?
What kind of programming languages do you generally use?
I know you do OpenGL for part of it, Python for part of it, MATLAB for part of it, C# for part of it. It kind of depends on who you're talking to as to what they use. In our lab, we use MATLAB for Python to interface, and then the Python feeds into the MATLAB, which is the actual code doing the processing of what's the intent. MATLAB, for all you techniques, runs a little more slowly, but it's really robust. There's a whole bunch of libraries and a whole bunch of open source brain computer interface stuff on it for it now. You know, so because that's really easy to use. Okay, let's see another one. Wait. Oh, good. Last one is cognition. And again, just because this is a very, there's all kinds of areas of research, and this isn't one that I work in very much. One of the guys at UCSD is a man named Jamie Pineda. Jamie and others have come up with this, and this idea that mu wave suppression occurs in healthy subjects when they're about to move or when they see someone familiar. For example, what's your name? Tiffany and Becca. If Becca's sitting there and Tiffany starts to stand up, wait, which one's Tiffany? Becca's mu waves, meaning certain waves in her that are coming out in the EEG, will be suppressed. You'll see them go down. And when Becca stands up, they will also be suppressed.
What are they called?
Mu, just MU, it's a Greek letter. And there's certain frequencies of brain waves. I'll actually show them to you on the simulator here in a minute. And so that happens in healthy subjects. If, however, Becca were autistic, when she stood up, when Becca stood up, she would still see the mu wave suppression. But when Tiffany stands up, she will not. This means in certain people on the autism spectrum, they do not perceive motion the same way you or I would. It's just not there. It's a perceptual deficit in the system. And so Pineda and others figured this out and have written like 4 papers. One of them just came out last month, showing that they can use brain-computer interfaces with biofeedback to train and improve the mirror neuron system in autistic subjects. This means they'll play a game where they'll have a ball, and I'll show you these in a minute. They'll have a ball and somebody will say, okay, make your mu waves change to make the ball rise. And somebody will go, I don't understand, how do I make my mu waves change? You know, just make the ball rise. And people eventually, by looking at it, can start doing it even though they can't articulate to you what they're changing in their brains. They can't tell you, they can't sit there and go, oh, I just did this and my mu waves changed. Any more than you can tell me how you move your arm. You just do. Same thing, using biofeedback and games and brain-computer interfaces. This has already shown promise both for diagnosis and treatment of autism, at least in certain regimes and certain subjects. And Pineda's working on that right now. Really quickly, give me one volunteer. Who wants to try a brain-computer interface? You, sir. Would you, as well as my lovely assistant outside, she's going to set you up. I'm going to have him set up for just a minute. And don't worry, everybody will get a chance to try it. I just want to, get it started. Thank you. It takes just a few minutes to set it up, so she's going to set him up while we finish up here. So autism is one area of cognition where you actually have the opportunity to make a real impact with brain-computer interface systems. And so these 3 areas, perception, motion, and cognition, are 3 big areas where you go, who am I and how do I interact with what's around me? And so brain-computer interfaces have shown promise in all of these areas for making a difference in the quality of life of different types of people. Where does this all lead? I mean, what's the end of this? You really look forward to it a little bit more. Has anybody ever heard of Moore's Law? Gordon Moore from Intel? This idea and he did it, if I remember right, it was the number of processors on a chip. I can't remember exactly how he set it up. The idea was that the computing power doubles roughly every 18 months to 2 years. And so if we plot this as a function of time, starting back in 1970, you can see we've kind of leveled out on the processor megahertz we can deal with. In case you haven't noticed, your computer hasn't gone up in the number of megahertz that the processor has in quite a while. It's always like between 3.1 and 3.5 per core. And then they'll just add more cores to make it faster. And so if you measure them instead of what are called MIPS, right? Millions of instructions per second, that number has kept exact track with Moore's Law. If we look at the number of MIPS estimated for certain biological organisms, for example, a mouse, we have completely already moved past the computing power of a mouse. We can do that now. Assuming this doubling rate keeps up, sometime about the year 2022, you'll have the computing power of a human being in one regular computer. At this point, it's going to become very difficult to identify things like what makes a human a human. It's easy to sit there and go, oh, because they have skin or because they walk. That's pretty arbitrary. If you think about it in terms of what is, in terms of mental processing abilities, when the machines show up, it's going to be a very interesting time. This all sounds pretty crazy until you realize that Elon Musk, does anybody know who that is? Founder of Tesla Motors. They call him the living Tony Stark. Elon Musk is a really big player in this field. And he gave a talk at MIT just last week where he warned about the dangers of artificial intelligence. He's worried that very quickly we're going to cross this threshold and no one's going to be able to stop it because we didn't put the safeguards in place in time. And so this is very quickly becoming a reality. And once it happens, this leads to things like augmented humans. You have humans where imagine you go, oh, I just can't remember that. You can easily set it up so you literally have something inside your head that has a giant database of storage for you. You can put Google right in your brain, help yourself. You already do this and you don't know it because you're like young. In the old days, we used to do this thing called a library. I just heard yesterday, library. It was kind of like Wikipedia, but you had to be really quiet when you were there. Now you literally just Google whatever you want, right? Oh, I want this, Google. And like all the facts in the world, this huge amount of stuff is out there. I know you don't know this, but like when I was a kid, that didn't happen. We didn't have the internet when I was in college at all. And so there was no way to grab data. Now you can just grab data off the internet so quickly, it's insane compared to what we used to do. Imagine sticking all that directly into your brain, an augmented human. Imagine doing something like an augmented reality where you can see whatever you want. You go, oh, hey, students, today we're doing this program on astronomy. Load up the file on how stars work. And you load it up, and all of you see stars appear in the middle of the room, even though there's nothing there. It's all happening because it's being fed in through your bionic eye, and you downloaded the data. How about fused reality? Meaning the idea that part of your life is lived in virtual reality, and part of it is lived in what we would call the real world. Kind of like the Matrix. There's no reason in principle that's not possible. I know, this lady right here is looking like I'm a nutcase. Until it happens, you come on it. It's going to happen. I promise you it's going to happen. Of course it is. And as soon as it does, you'll be able to switch in and out of virtual reality as simply as you walk in and out of this room. And you could have friends who live a continent away, and you go see each other in virtual reality, and to you it's exactly the same as if you're there. I already know people, certain professors who teach their classes online, that have office hours in Second Life. The kids show up and they do the class right there. They have a board, they do all the stuff, everything just like they're in the classroom. And that's happening today. And finally, fused humans. Imagine the idea of connecting yourself to another person. Most of you are kind of like, wait a minute. What if you could do it in a limited scope? What if you had the ability to just connect yourself to, say, certain memories that you might want, or certain abilities? I spent a lot of years of my life learning science. What if I could save you all the trouble? Here, download my file. There you go. You now know every problem I've ever worked in 20 years. Have a good day. And of course, you have things that I want. I go, oh, you know how to play the violin? I really want to know that. Download me. Done. Why is that so logically excluded? All we need to understand to do this is the understanding of how memory works and how to move it in and out of the computing substrate that is known as your brain. Once you know how to do that, it's no different than moving data on a hard drive. You just have to hack the brain to do it. Big task, but not impossible. You're not off the scale. Imagine that if you connected everybody, you might have a graph that would look something like this, where all people are connected to everybody, and you can just pick and choose. Some people will go, I want to be fused with everybody. Some people will say, I want to be fused with just a few people so I can get pieces of information that I want, or experiences. Imagine being able to experience a lifetime in a different country because that other person has lived in Italy their whole lives and you want to know what it's like to live in Italy. No problem, have yourself download it. You could live thousands of lifetimes worth of experiences with no problem. Help yourself. And it would be to you as real as if you'd been there. It won't be a memory like you're looking at a movie. It includes all modes, sensory, the feelings of the experience. I know what it felt like to sit in Pisa and smell pizza while I was going up the tower, or whatever you do with Pisa. I've been there. They don't let you up the tower. At least not until it's night and you sneak in. This leads to one final conclusion then. How many people have ever seen Star Trek The Next Generation? Yeah. Oh, you have? Oh, my kind of people. These are the Borg, those of you who don't know. A giant race of cybernetic zombies that are all connected to each other and have augmentations to their bodies through what we would classify as giant brain-computer interfaces. I sincerely believe that this is where humanity is headed. Now, before you get freaked out because the guy has a terrible fashion sense and needs some sun, don't freak. Before you get all freaked out by that kind of thing, keep in mind what this means. Imagine for just a moment a colony of ants. Have you ever watched ants? They work together in really cool ways. If you imagine an individual ant walking around, it's very simple. It has a very simple little operating system and a very little program that we completely hack. We can tell you exactly what ants do. They look at this, they put a sniffer there, they lay a scent trail there. It's a very simple computational thing, one ant. And yet you'll see ants take down huge amounts of food and animals and everything else because they know how to work together. Each of their little operating systems has a thing that does something. Leaves a trail for the next ant to follow or go after or whatever. And so that is exactly what humanity is like right now. We are like the ants that don't work together. If the entire world is a team, half the team is trying to kill the other half. Look at all the wars in the world. That's all it is. Half the team is trying to kill the other half all the time. Imagine if we could connect into each other in such a way that we could work together. That you could have thousands of lifetimes of experiences and knowledge like that in a minute. And that's what reality would be like. We would go from being individuals to being one super organism, a giant collective organism that couldn't be defined only in terms of you or me. It would just be one creature that is a combination and amalgam of all of us at once. Just like an ant colony isn't just one ant, it's a collection. Same thing. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What about immortality?
Oh, I don't think you're going to die. I know, I know. What the crap is he talking about now? I don't think you're ever going to die. Google is working on a project right now called, what is the name of that project? Calico. Google's Project Calico is working on researching immortality right now. They think they can arrest cell death within the next 30 years. I think there's a very good chance if you're in college today, you're not going to die. I'm serious. I don't think you're going to die. Sounds nuts until you realize our life expectancy is like in the mid-70s right now, 72, 73. You know, in the year 1900, it was about 40. You know, 1 in 5 children died of something before they hit the age of 18 because we didn't understand that germs cause diseases. You look back and you go, that's crazy. That's what they will think of us in 50 years. Yeah.
What's your belief, like I forget which scientists spoke about how our entire society is being built around technology, like you're saying, but most of society does not know anything about it, and how, you know, where these laws go and the protections like you talked about.
Was that Neil deGrasse Tyson that said that? It might have been. Was that Tyson?
No, not Tyson. It was someone who, it was his inspiration.
Oh, Carl Sagan.
Carl Sagan.
Yeah. Absolutely, I do agree technology is being the foundation of society because it works. The problem is the complexity is starting to run away from the average individual. There's no way, I mean, I'm not a stupid man and I can't keep up with what's going on. There's no way, nobody can do it. You know, and so it becomes the average person, I think the average person just needs to have an appreciation for what technology is giving them. If they could really do that, they'd be fine. Nobody needs to I don't need to build a computer to use it. I don't need to build a car to use it. I just need to have a respect for the people who did it. Yeah, you're fine. So I'm not too worried about it in that respect. Yes, sir.
When you were talking about that, how you can alter images,
Mm-hmm.
how we have people that are, do black holes, how we could implement that in our brains.
Mm-hmm.
I understand and respect the technology for it, but what's the value of it on the market? Because that sounds like a terrible idea to just have in public for sale.
Could be. It's one of those things where you sit there and go, there's that rule, I can't remember what the rule is. There's whose law is that? There's a rule that says a technology once designed cannot be predicted in terms of its evolution.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, you design something, you can't tell which way it's going to go. Some people are probably going to take the hammer and use it for evil. They always do. Some people are going to take it and use it for good. And all you can really do is hope that the good outweighs the bad. You know, because it's too hard to tell. I always sit there and imagine, like, I'm teaching a physics class at Cal State San Marcos right now, and we're doing thermodynamic phase spaces. Very hard to visualize. Very hard. And I'm trying to draw them on the board and then these higher dimensional objects, and I just can't draw them. I took that art class. And so the kids are looking at it like, what is this? Imagine if I could just put it in the middle of the room and we could walk around and interact with it. That alone would give my students a quantum leap in understanding that I just can't infer right now. I've been trying for a week and a half, and it's just not coming.
I see the benefit.
You're all failing. What's that?
So I see the benefit if you have it like on an interface. Like
Yeah.
You can use it, but in your head, like we already have crazy people that are imagining things, so they can see them. That's where it works.
Well, that's an interesting question. If you blur the line between reality and fiction, or between reality and augmented reality. Yeah, some people have a problem. I see your point. I definitely do. It's one of those questions that people have to ask about. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember you mentioned something about if everyone cared about others more than they cared about themselves, then automatically you would have that kind of universal system.
Yeah, and then we sat around and meditated after class.
Right? Like
Yeah.
that could be implemented, in the wiring as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
Well, that was the reason Taylor mentioned this, because we were talking about this briefly in class one day. And one of the things that came up was the idea that if you ask yourself where any form of human hurting another human comes from, doesn't it come from, in some sense, an evaluation of the other person? If you think very carefully, you could probably, I'm hoping, never hurt your family, like your parents. You'd never kill your family member. But there are situations where we kill other people in the real world. Happens all the time. And so if we think about it carefully, you can make everybody else in the world through a brain-computer interface seem as important to you as your own family members are. Nobody, probably some obvious things, as soon as you make rules, somebody makes an exception. But for the most part, we could eliminate most violence like that. Who's going to hurt somebody else that they think is their own mom or their own dad? If you saw the world as they see it, how in the world could you? Yeah, he's like, oh, I could. No.
It's so easy to move anything that you're suggesting like that around to stimulate my brain to see your value in life as important as mine.
Yeah.
It's just as easy to be stimulated the other way, and it put you extremely below my level of life.
And that's a good point. I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
Could you stimulate something the other way? In my mind, I'd imagine translating direct experiences. So like I see you as much as I see myself, as though you are a part of me. But could you, I mean, I'm sure if you sit there and go, if I did it just right, you could hurt somebody with it. You could sit there and make the person devalue something.
Like a brain virus.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what's that?
Like a virus.
Hmm.
I mean, any piece of software that we've written can be controlled by another piece of software. So anytime we're interacting directly with the brain to control something, we could interact something else that could tell it to do something else. Or, a virus.
That's a good question. Yeah, you might have a good point there.
If I was to link my brain to a whole bunch of other people, it'd be the same as linking my computer to the internet, which is a whole link of computers. There's a big micro brain right now. It's full of viruses.
Like corporate America could be like, I want you to buy our products, so we just put that in our brain.
That's actually closer. Taylor says you might be able to make people buy products. That's closer than you think. One of the products I'm working on right now is a neuromarketing package. It reads your brainwaves while you're looking at a commercial and goes, okay, here's where they liked it the most. Here's what they thought what they're most familiar with. Here's what surprised them about it. Here's what they appreciated the most. And it's in ways they can't even articulate because it's happening at a subconscious level, but I can read it. And so the point is then the commercial can adapt to the individual. It goes, oh, that's working well, tweak it a little. And it kind of plays along those lines. The video has several sets of videos that adapt depending on what the user does through the space.
Doesn't Google already do that?
Yeah, same thing, exactly. Same idea, except for now instead of clicks and where you've been and what's in your Gmail, it's going to be directly off your brain data at that moment. It's a more invasive version of the same idea. But it's okay, because I'm hoping to make a lot of money. Yes?
When you said that everyone would be interconnected and sharing experiences, do you think that the value of experiences would be diminished if you could experience everything? Would you have to, would the, I guess, market for ultimate reality become greater because no one would be satisfied with like your bucket list? You'd be able to knock your bucket list out in a week.
Right, you're 17, you've done everything you've ever wanted to do.
If you don't die, like you're saying we don't die.
Excellent question. It's an existential problem, right? You're going, what do I do if there's nothing left to do? I read a study once where they showed that if you give people beer, this is something you're all familiar with, let's talk about beer. If you give people beer, if you line up to 3 beers and say, you can have one of the beers for free, people will pick one. You take out the whole thing from the restaurant, like 25 beers, and you want to go, you can have a beer for free. People won't pick any of them because they're overwhelmed by the choices. They don't know. They're always afraid that if they pick one beer, the other beer will be better. People get overwhelmed by choice if they aren't careful. And so I'm very curious, maybe it is that you put some functional limit on it to optimize happiness. An easy way to think about it, right off the top of my head, is I go, we can detect satisfaction. It's a very specific set of waves that we can deconstruct right now using an EEG. So you could have it downward experiences until you saw your satisfaction in your brainwaves going down. You go, oh, okay, they're done. They're getting a diminishing return now for more experiences. Quit giving them to them. So it would automatically cut off at the right time. It would be trained based on your own happiness coming out of your brainwaves to know. And that would work. It still optimizes happiness. Doesn't give you the whole world. Just gives you whatever part you want. Yes, sir.
This is kind of a question about that gentleman. I mean, this kind of science and technology is like a big candy store.
Yeah, it is.
And so I'm just wondering, is anybody thinking about whether we ought to do any of these things?
Sure. There's always that question, right? What we can do, we forgot to ask whether or not we should do. Frankly, I think about it a lot. And I know a lot of very assiduous researchers who do. This is one of the reasons that a lot of people I know, for example, do you guys know who DARPA is? The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They handle like the GPS and the internet, pretty much. They fund a lot of big projects. They have money, they just throw it at us. I was at the conference and they're just like, oh, come talk to us about your ideas. They're just going to throw money at us and then stuff. But the problem is when we do it, the military gets it, and it's classified. And so I know lots of people in my field who are very leery about doing that. That's why they work at universities. They go, everything we make is open source. It's kind of like the open source movement in operating systems. You can't hide anything if we can all track what you're doing. Versus something like Windows, where if there's a bug in it, you don't know. You can see the source code for Windows. And so it's more like Linux, where you go, we're going to make it open source, that way if something happens, we can fix it right away. I think, honestly, after giving it some thought for quite a while, I think that's our best hope. Because if not, it's one of these problems of the Red Queen, where, the problem of the Red Queen is? Alice in Wonderland. Alice is running with the Red Queen, and the forest isn't going anywhere behind her. And Alice goes, what's going on? The forest isn't going anywhere. Why aren't we running? She goes, we are running. We're running as fast as we can. This is how fast we have to run to keep up with the forest. If we stop, the forest will zip by us the other direction. Every time you're working on something, so is someone else. You know, if I have an idea for something, so does someone else. At least I know with me, I'm going to try to use it for the right purposes. You know, because there's a very deep moral responsibility here. You know, you go, some jerk is sitting there writing this stuff probably right now and sit there and use it for something that we definitely don't want to happen.
So what you're saying is that you've been in conferences and places where this is a part of the conversation?
Oh yeah, ethics is a huge part. There's whole sections on bio. There are people who publish stuff on bioethics, and that's all they do. When can you use this? When shouldn't you use it? When does the good outweigh the bad? And what about the unintended consequences of it? You know, and there are very serious people who spend all their time working on just that. I'm thankful for it because they're very clever people and they know what they're doing. And nice, and that's good. We need it, but other than that, I'm not sure how to stop it from coming. You know, anybody else?
So going back to this original piece, you're talking about all senses, so you could up or down regulate to tactile response.
Mm-hmm. I think so. I see no reason that's not possible.
Or up regulate auditory and down regulate.
Absolutely. Has anybody ever heard of what's called a TMS? Transcranial magnetic stimulator? No? It's the thing they put over top of your head right now. They put a changing magnetic field on it really fast. It's boom, and induces, you know, big magnetic flux through your brain and makes a bunch of electrical currents fire. And so right now it's dealt with in big bulk units because it can't be that accurate. So like I've seen people get in it and they'll forget things like how to recognize faces for a couple hours, stuff like that. And because they're doing experiments with it. But the problem is the TM. I know. Yeah, the student was like, I was on the way home and I couldn't tell if anybody was smiling or not. Like, it was kind of weird. They couldn't interpret facial expressions. I said, that's the coolest thing ever. Hook me up. I keep trying to get them to do it at happy hour. Like, we're going to go have a few drinks and walk into the TMS and have a little fun. They're not going for it. Come here, undergraduate. Let me put you in this. But the idea then is that stimulates brain activity. And you can use it to up or down something in your senses if you wanted to. Right now, it's such a bulk level phenomenon, it doesn't work. You need to get it down to more precise regions so you can stimulate the auditory cortex without making them forget who they are and pee their pants. You know, something like that. Yes, sir?
You're using it to treat people with Parkinson's.
Oh, no kidding. Oh, I know. I've never even seen that. I know that, you know, Parkinson's is such an active area of research, and we've done a little bit with it just in biofeedback stuff. But I didn't know they were using TMS. It's fantastic. Huh. Yes?
When you say that you think that none of us will die, but
Uh-huh.
obviously even just like iPhones are expensive.
Yep.
Would this only be for the affluent?
No. In the beginning, yes. I think these technologies always peter down to a point where they reach the demand. It's just like the Tesla. You guys seen those cars, the Teslas, right? They start out super expensive, and every generation, the lower end version of it gets cheaper by about half. Now the new one, like the Model D they just came out with, is still $120,000. But the lower end ones are getting cheaper every year because after you've sold them to all the super rich, you still want to leverage the technology. The parts aren't that expensive. They want to keep making them. But they know for a fact if we sell them at a really high price point first, the rich will pick them up. And then once you've sold out of rich people willing to buy them, and you can tell, sales will go down. Then you lower the price some and get the next ones down. If they dump them on the market for $20,000, they wouldn't make their profit back. But this way they're making plenty of money, and eventually it has to come down because there's no more rich people to buy it. Yes, sir.
Isn't there a world limit to letting people die because they're poor?
I don't know. It's one of those things, I mean, this is the kind of thing we need to go to Buffalo Wild Wings and have a few beers and some wings and talk about it. And you can sit here and talk about, you can talk all day, like, I don't know, should a person make their own choice? I don't know. I can do this in a circle all night. A few shots of Fireball whiskey, it gets a lot clearer. Brittany, you were going to say something.
I'm just going to say, we can't sustain a population if everyone stays alive.
Absolutely. And that's where you have to make hard choices. You know, is it the case that you go, you can't have children unless you're willing to die in 40 years? So that way you are replaced by someone else. That way the population is stable. I truly believe we are rapidly coming to a place at about 10 billion people where the earth can't support the number of people on the planet anymore. And when it happens, we will make hard choices. When I was at the conference 2 years ago, they had a thing with the dry electrode caps, and it was beaming the signal over Bluetooth into a server that was streaming outward to anybody who had access to it with an app on their phone. So the guy at the conference goes, look, here's your brainwaves. And he's showing them to me on his phone. I go, how'd you do that? He got them from the Bluetooth to the server where they're broadcast over the internet and then processed by an app. All we'd have to take is take the control signal from the rover, run into your brain-computer interface, and you're done. It's like working with building blocks. The building blocks are hard originally, but once you build them, it's easy to put them together. Anybody else? Yes?
If you could take somebody's experiences, like, for example, certain marks like sports, like the World Series Game 7 right now, what would be the point of watching it or going to it if you could be the guy threw the game-winning pitch or gave a save.
Good
I feel like it
question.
would collapse a bunch of markets because it would take down ratings. You wouldn't have to watch it. You could just do it.
Good question.
I could be LeBron James.
Absolutely.
Be tall.
Me too. There is a possibility. Have you guys ever heard of what's called a reactive? No? A reactive is a more advanced version of a movie where you pick what happens. They're just now starting to come online with these. You ever see these commercials when you're watching like CBS online or something? They'll have a thing that'll say, choose which commercial you want, or choose what so-and-so does, and you pick one, and then the commercial splits based on what you're doing. Imagine being able to do that at a broader level. And so you could charge for, instead of just going to the game, you charge for the experience, individually downloaded to you, right? I imagine this is the exact kind of discussion people had whenever they started making things like records. Before that, the only way to make money was to go to a live concert. Right? People went, our concert's going to go by the wayside. You know, not everybody can just buy a record and keep it forever. And concerts are still around, but granted, their demographic has changed. Why you go to them has changed. What do you expect out of them has changed. You know, and so maybe there'll be changes like that we haven't even thought of. I don't know. Yeah.
Like iTunes, you're going to rent these.
Pirate Bay for brains.
What if, like iTunes, you rent these memories or these thoughts or these experiences or education?
Yeah, you can sell them off. I can sit there and go, I spent years studying quantum mechanics. I'm going to sell it to you. You can have it for a nominal fee. YouTube can download quantum mechanics. Help yourself.
This is what keeps the markets from diminishing, though. The fact that you have to keep buying them, or there's new people that would want to purchase them.
It's true. I mean, this is a very real. I think economics will undergo a radical. Now, I'm no economist. I'm just telling you that as products come out, things change, and I'm not sure how. I don't even. It's beyond my ilk. Anybody else? I really gotta get through this because I want to show you guys the actual stuff in action. Yes, sir. Maybe two more questions.
Do you think there would be like a really serious government regulations on this kind of technology?
Yes. People have already talked about what the government will or won't step in on. Because things like the FDA, right now these devices are not regulated by the FDA, but someday they probably will. They almost have to be. Some things like the electrocardiogram, those are, because those are invasive brain techniques. As we build more and more software that can do stuff, you have to start going, wait, does that really hurt anybody, or did it do what you said it would do? And so there are whole people who talk about government lobbying to get regulation to have some kind of approval process. Because it works. Right now, I can put any product on the market, say it does this from your brainwaves, and you don't know the difference. There's no, it's opaque. There's no transparency to the system. Yeah. Okay, let's see this. You guys want to see it? Let's see it. Let's do it. This is our volunteer. What's your name?
Dan.
Dan? Thank you, Dan. Have a seat, would you?
Anywhere?
Right there in this chair. Dan is wearing a device called a NeuroSky headset. This headset is reading Dan's brainwaves from this. It is a single electrode system. This is what we call the FP, front parietal, I think it is, that is reading. As it does so, let me show you what we see here. Dan, I'm going to put your brainwaves up on the screen if you don't mind.
No worries. They usually charge for this kind of thing.
That's right, you should charge double for that action. Oh, Dan, no. I'm kidding. It's fine. Everything's okay. It's not Dan. These are Dan's brainwaves. These are his waves by frequency, meaning as his neurons fire, they go boom, and they fire. Now imagine they fired one time a second and went boom. Then now let's say he's the very bad student. He has one neuron, boom. As he goes boom. And one time a second, he fires off 1 hertz. What we call 1 hertz meaning like 1 cycle per second. Boom, 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 boom. I can count it off. If he fires 2 times a second, it's boom, 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 twice a second. That's 2 hertz. Sum all those up and you get all the possible frequencies. Sometimes firing at 50 times a second. Some of them are firing at 100 times a second. And the power of each of those is represented on this graph. Meaning, for example, right around here we see 10 hertz. This is the power of all the neurons combined that are firing 10 times per second in his brain right now. Dan, would you do me a favor? Close your eyes. Keep them closed. Watch how the pattern starts to change over here on the left. Yeah, this is his brainwaves changing. Each of these is an EEG regime, meaning alpha is a certain frequency band up to, I think it's 13 hertz. And so each of these bands is a certain set of frequencies. So we can see what frequencies he's putting out from his brain just by watching that. Dan, you can open your eyes now. We're going to have Dan try a game. Dan, would you stand up and come right back here? This NeuroSky is just going through Bluetooth into my computer where I have the software installed. Oh, actually, stand over there so you can see the game. I didn't realize I keep forgetting the screen's split. Okay, and game. Okay, so we have a couple of different games here. Let's do this one first. This game works off of attention. If you focus your attention really hard, Dan, do me a favor, look at the ball, calm your mind, it's hard with a crowd of like 70 people watching, and focus on the ball and just concentrate on it, very carefully. Dan, look over here. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Pay attention to that. And sure enough, when Dan quits paying attention to the ball drops. I'm sorry.
You didn't tell me you were going to do that.
That's why. And everybody's like, oh, okay. As the more Dan gets shocked, the ball the ball will drop. The more he's focusing on it, this results in alpha waves coming out of his frontal lobe right here. Very easy for this one sensor to pick up. As you can see, this is a very gross sensor. It's just one. So it's a very simple setup. This isn't very complex. In terms of what we can do, this is a very straightforward, like this is the 0th order of what we can do. Then we do much more advanced stuff as we get full headsets. They won't let me have the $20,000 equipment to bring it here. But then let me have this one. And as he focuses, sure enough, the ball will rise. This is what we call the Jedi mind trick. I used one a few years ago that's attached to a little thing with a fan and like a little cage around it. So when you concentrate on it, the fan and the cage will literally float and fly around the room. And so it feels like the Jedi mind trick. You sit there and go, lift and concentrate, the thing lifts. It's incredible. See what I mean about the prehensile tails on the children? Isn't this a good idea? You can see Dan's brainwaves patterns. Try to do it one more time, Dan. I'm trying not to talk while he's doing it. If you watch the brainwave patterns, you'll see them shift toward the alpha while it's working. Now, different brainwave patterns are associated with different processes. For example, gamma, low and high gamma, are both associated with what we call higher order cognition. For example, creative thinking, synthesizing things. And so another piece of software I want to write eventually is a system that rewards you for gamma. It's called a gamma induction. So you sit there and go, if I'm thinking about things creatively, like my brain's in that state, so, when you're really in the zone, you're like, you can tell, if you're creating stuff and it's working, your gamma waves are much, much higher. And so I want to create a system that rewards people like this, except for works off of gamma. And so that way we can train students, here's how you get those gamma inductions so you think more creatively, keep you in those states more often. Dan, could you do this? I want to try one more thing. I tried this earlier, it worked with me. Try doing this thing again. Excellent. Now start thinking your ABCs. Think them, just think ABCs. Yeah, sure enough, it's dropping. It won't stay as high. Mine, I couldn't keep it at all. I tried to just boom, and start falling because I was working on cognition. I was working on processing that information and not concentrating on the ball in front of me. Like I couldn't do two at once. My girlfriend will tell you I can't multitask with anything. It's like I'm sitting over here just saying the ABCs, and that's just not even there anymore. But, yeah.
What if he closes his eyes but still focuses on rising the ball?
Good question. Try it. Should be a researcher with that kind of mentality. Wow, that's high. Very good. I feel like Yoda. All right.
Well, they say like
feel the force flow through you.
They say like if you're actually doing something,
yeah,
it's the same chemical reactions are going on as if you were to visualize it. Like
apparently so. I mean, this is one of those areas where I'm not that familiar with what the state of the art is in it. Does somebody else have a question on this? Really quick? Somebody
Yeah, I just had the same one.
Oh, same one. Okay. Let's have you try one more game.
Could you explain the other waves and what they mean?
Some of them I don't work in, so I'm not sure of them. I know, for example, let me go with this. Depending on which cortex you're talking about, if I remember right, I think I do. Theta waves. No, delta waves are associated with, is it with sleep? I can't remember because I work mostly with alpha, so I'm sort of trying to think like what it is I'm working with. I don't know it. Let's try one more on this game. Well, this is actually used. One of the ideas that you could use this for, since the attention span is focused on your alpha, you could use it to train kids who have ADHD. It's a neurofeedback. It's a game. They'll sit there and play it, and the more they can keep their alpha going, the better they do at the game. And so they go, "Oh, cool! This is easy biofeedback training." Concentrate really hard. There he goes. The more he concentrates, the faster the barrel burns. There he goes. Got it. and it starts over. This one is purely attention-based. It's just looking for how hard you're trying to focus on the thing. The other one also has a meditation component, meaning while you're focusing on it, are you calm and relaxed? Like, is your mental state in a place where you're, focused on it, like a meditative state? I've seen one already where they use an app for this kind of thing for people who want to get better at meditation. It feeds the NeuroSky directly into a Bluetooth into your cell phone, and the app will do things to help you, like with your meditation. Like it'll, just feed back when you're doing things right. Keep working there, Dan. I want to show you another one. Where is it? There it is. Okay. Oh, it didn't do it. I'm sorry. This one had a little problem. That's fine. The other one that I wanted to show you guys, but it's not on here, there was a problem with the installation. It's called Lucid Scribed, which is for people to train themselves to be able to have lucid dreams. And so what it does is it sits there and waits. You wear this while you're sleeping. And when you go into REM sleep, meaning you're having dreams, it knows what you're doing. It goes, oh, you're going into REM sleep. So it will automatically play a sound, like through your computer or a song, whatever you program it to. And it will be loud enough that it won't wake you up, but you'll hear it in your dream. You know how you sometimes hear sounds in your dreams? And then that's your signal. You go, oh, I'm hearing, Tainted Love. And that means I'm supposed to be in a dream now. Woohoo, It's just my signal. I don't know what you guys are doing. It's entirely your business.
What's it called?
Tainted Love. It was by Soft Cell in 1981. It's a classic. Remade by Marilyn Manson, the whole thing. No, that one's called Lucid Scribe. Lucidscribe. All right, let's have a hand for Mike. Thank you very much. Dan, sorry. All right, so guys, anybody else who wants to try it, we have this. We also have the setups over there where two people can play at a time at games to control a ball and try to push it toward each other using great computer interfaces. Please come on up if you want to try them. Thank you very much for coming.